so today was a long day at work and I'm tired.
Alright, so today was a long day at work and I'm tired. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to go ahead and go through Matthew chapter 5. And then after that I'm going to play a little ESO. So I'll go through chapter 5 and then switch over to gaming. So in chapter 5, Jesus is really starting his ministry. And it says, when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, "The poor in spirit are blessed, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs." And I guess I'll kind of, some of what I talk about is because of learning I've done in the past, and some of it is just my thoughts. And this phrase, the poor in spirit, always kind of confused me as to what it really meant. And really, the poor in spirit are, actually I was going to say that. Give me 1 second. I'm scrolling down to look because I don't want to say what I'm about to say and then say, wait, no, it actually, that one's it. Okay.
So the poor in spirit, if I'm not mistaken, is...
So the poor in spirit, if I'm not mistaken, is the humble, meaning not proud. So humility doesn't mean, in the Bible, really in life, it doesn't mean being humiliated. It really just means that you don't consider yourself better than others. And so the poor in spirit, or in essence, like you don't think you're better than everybody else, those are blessed, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And really the idea is that you put other people at least on the equal footing with you. If not, you see yourself as living to serve them or living to help other people. Those who mourn will be blessed, for they will be comforted. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Although, what is the comfort? And I think the thing there is, the idea is that you'll be comforted by God. And how does that happen? In every dark time, there are actually good things. I remember, when my grandmother died in particular, I remember thinking, man, it's sunny out. Like, shouldn't it be raining? It just felt wrong that it was sunny and pretty out. And, I was going through this great loss. But I've learned a lot in the course of life, that even though bad things, and sometimes really bad things happen, there are good things too. And so you have both. Like, you're not everything's bad all at once, usually. Although sometimes that happens. But there's always something good to look for. The gentle are blessed, for they will inherit the earth. And I think here, with gentle, what you're looking at is, are you a fighting kind of person, right? Or do you kind of sit back and try and see your way through things rather than wanting to be aggressive or fight about everything? Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness are blessed, for they will be filled. And so you're hungering, thirsting for this thing, and then you're going to get it, right? So being filled means that if you hunger, you're going to eat. If you thirst, you're going to have something to drink. And what the hungering and thirsting for is righteousness. And what that basically means at the most basic level is you don't want to be wrong. You want to be right. And some people sometimes would rather be wrong and win. Knowing they're wrong, would rather be wrong and win than to admit they're right. But the people who really are going to be filled and satisfied and fulfilled are those who really would rather lose the battle, but then learn the right thing. Verse 7, The merciful are blessed, for they will be shown mercy. That's another one that's pretty self-explanatory too. But when you're good, when you're merciful toward other people, then they tend to soften toward you. Verse 8, the pure in heart are blessed, for they will see God. And again, it kind of comes back to this whole idea of wanting to be right and not be wrong, or in this case, maybe to do the right thing rather than doing the wrong thing. And sometimes we don't know the right thing to do, but it's the wanting to do the right thing that makes the difference. Verse 9, the peacemakers are blessed, for they will be called sons of God. It kind of makes me think of everything going on right now with all the protests, right? I mean, that is definitely not peacemaking. And I think, like, these people are just complaining publicly, essentially, you know. But those who are actually looking for ways to make peace are blessed. And what does it even mean to be blessed? It means praise. In one sense, it does just literally mean to be praised. But it does also have the sense of good things are going to come to you, right? So if you look for a way to make peace, good things will come to you. If you just stand out and complain, well, yeah, you could work it out. Verse 10, those who are persecuted for righteousness are blessed, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And I think this one is pretty clear on, reward too. Like, if you do the right thing and people don't treat you well because you're doing the right thing for their own reasons, then there is a reward in that, and that is the kingdom of heaven. When you're willing to take a stand and do the right thing. And that doesn't mean fight or complain loudly. That's not it. In fact, doing the right thing is very often a quiet decision, and it happens sometimes behind closed doors or in small, isolated situations. It's not the people who are standing out saying, hey, I'm doing this, and I'm with so-and-so, and da-da-da, and, that's not where the hardest right decisions are made. It's the hardest right decisions are made sometimes when no one's even looking. Verse 11, you are blessed when they insult and persecute you falsely and say every kind of evil against you because of me. And it sounds kind of funny, right? So when people are treating you really badly, you're blessed because of me. But they did the same thing to Jesus, as we'll see later on. And if we look at the word bless, like the first kind of definition where you're praised, well, you're blessed because of me. Well, Jesus is praising you, essentially, because you're enduring whatever they are saying and not giving in, right? Not giving up. And it goes on to say in verse 12, be glad and rejoice because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So, not only is he praising you for standing strong, even though people are coming against you, but then also you have rewards to look for. Because they did that to other people, you're not the first. You won't be the last. Verse 13, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. So I always thought that was a really strange saying, because how does salt not be salty? Like, salt is salty, like, period. Until I almost swallowed my mint. I did that earlier. My mint was down and I just was talking and boom. I almost did it again. Maybe I can't talk and have a mint at the same time. This is lesson number 2. Y'all going to be watching one day and I'm going to choke to death on a mint. Anyway. So, our salt is pure. But once upon a time, salt was not so pure and so had other minerals other material in it. And so if that were the case, then you could kind of see how, run water through it, you're left with whatever you're left with, but it doesn't taste salty anymore, or whatever it is, however it would play out. And so then, if you want to put salt on your food, but it doesn't taste salty, what's the point? No good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. But here's the thing. You are the salt of the earth. So what does that mean? What is salt used for? It makes everything taste better, right? So it makes things better. But it also preserves, so it helps things last longer. And so when it says you are the salt of the earth, then really what it's saying that we are to be is we're what makes life a little bit better, right? And then also preserves it and makes it last longer, makes it good and makes it good for longer. Verse 14, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory, right? A city on a hill, you can see it. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
Do good things.
And so again, do good things.
Stand strong.
Don't compromise who you are in front of other people. Stand strong. Make good choices, and don't hide that part of you.
Verse 17. Don't assume that I came to destroy the law or the prophets.
Verse 17. Don't assume that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. All right, this one little sentence requires a good bit of discussion and explanation.
So what is the law?
Don't assume that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. So what is the law?
Are the 10 Commandments.
The part of the law that is most well known are the 10 Commandments, right? But there were a lot of other laws as well. And much of the Old Testament includes the giving of the law and, the working out of it, meaning what's it supposed to look like? Or this was said in the law and then it happened just the way it was said. And the law, what Jesus is saying is, I didn't come to overturn that. Those laws that were given, they're not to be thrown away. I came to fulfill it. I'm the fulfillment of the law. What the law required, that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to finish it. And the same thing with the prophets. He didn't come to replace the prophets. He came as the final prophet, essentially, in a sense. He came to finish out all the little pieces. It's like if you take the Old Testament, there are little gems that point to what Christ was done, all mixed up in it, all throughout it. And he came to take those things and pull it all together and make it all complete. For I assure you, verse 18, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all things are accomplished. Again, he came to make it complete, to finish it. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches people to do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So he didn't come to get rid of them. Keep doing it. It's still valid. There's still a good way to live. Verse 20. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, another verse. Who are the scribes? Who are the Pharisees?
Literally the name.
So the scribes,
Writing.
literally the name, like scribble, right? Writing. The scribes were those who were trained to write, and they had a teaching component to what they did as well. So they kept the records, right? And they made copies. But they also did teaching because they kept the records and made copies. And the Pharisees, one way to look at the Pharisees is they were the forerunners of the modern day rabbis. And so they were teachers of the law. They were teachers of the Jewish literature. So what he's saying is, unless your righteousness surpasses theirs, you're never going to enter the kingdom of heaven. Don't look at them as the pinnacle of what you should be as a Jew, because they're not it. You need to be better than they are. If you're not better than they are, you're never going to enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what Jesus is saying. And it's a little bit of a setup, because at this point, they don't know what that's going to take. How, in fact, we see it in little pieces throughout the New Testament. How do you get better than the scribes and Pharisees? They're the best we got. What can you do if you have to be better than they are? And the answer that eventually becomes obvious is nothing, because we can't do it ourselves. We needed Jesus to step in. It's what Jesus does for us that helps us to have a righteousness that surpasses the scribes and the Pharisees. But I'm jumping way ahead. That's near the end of the book. So, but he's kind of setting it up right now. So unless your righteousness is even better than the most righteous people you know, you're not going to get into heaven.
You have heard that it was said to our ancestors.
All right, verse 21. You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, fool, will be subject to the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin were like the police, the religious police. But whoever says you moron will be subject to hellfire. So I'm going to pause here for a minute. I don't really get how you moron is really so much worse than fool. I'm sure that that's just a failing in me, and that if I were at the time it was written and listening to the language, it could have been something the way it was said in the day that it was written that would have had a different meaning of, what it sounds like to us. Right? That one would have been worse than the other. But the idea really here is like, if you walk around angry and condemning others and having this real anger in your heart, that's the beginning of the bad things that we do. And it works itself out sometimes much worse. And, I think we see it that in some groups, in some cultures, they have this unrelenting anger. And they work it out in violence. And that's how it comes out. So that's what he's saying. Like, you don't murder someone and then become angry. No. You become angry, you hold on to it, you don't let it go, and then you murder someone. So you have to deal with the anger and what's happening inside of you before it has a chance to work itself out in your life. Verse 23. So if you are offering your gift on the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Okay. So he's talking about the anger in your heart, but then he says, when you go to the altar and remember your brother has something against you. So this is something you did to him. But he's talking about the anger in your own heart, right? So it and it's not murder, you couldn't have gone to your brother because he'd be dead. So it's a smaller thing. I know. I'm a little tired. Anyway.
It's alright. I'm going to have fun with mine. I'm going to be talking about the rainbow.
Funny. So the idea is, maybe whatever anger and ugliness you're holding within hasn't caused you to kill, but you did something, right? And so when you remember, look, I did somebody wrong, before going to try and do something nice with God, go fix what you did wrong. Deal with what's inside of your heart first. Deal with what you've done. Deal with that thing that keeps causing you to hurt somebody else. Verse 25, reach a settlement quickly with your adversary while you're on the way with him, or your adversary will hand you over to the judge to the officer, and you will be thrown into prison. Again, your adversary has something against you. You did something to them. So this is really talking about dealing with the ugliness inside of us. Get rid of it. Apologize. And apologizing and being reconciled are different. There's a person in my life, and not the only one. It's happened more than once, but there's a person in my life that I have forgiven, but I can't reconcile with this person because the same behavior is going to be done over and over and over. So, because that person is not ready to do things differently. And so there can be, I might be able to forgive that person, but we're not going to be able to reconcile. Because until the person I forgive decides they want a different way of life, then we can't reconcile. So what this is saying is, look, if you're the one doing the hurting, you're doing something wrong, you're doing it over and again, go get reconciled. What that means is you got to commit to not continue to hurt a person. So when you reconcile, you have to be willing to do things differently. And again, it comes back on what's inside of us here. And the same thing with the adversary who's going to hand you over to the judge. You know, you need to deal with it quickly while you're on the way with him. Don't let it get that far. Humble yourself and say, I'm wrong. I did this wrong. You know, I'm going to make it right. It's not going to happen again. I'm committed to changing what I'm doing.
Oh, fun. Verse 27.
Oh, fun. Verse 27.
You have heard that it was said,
You have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So this one, I told my husband we're going to have a lot of fun with some of this because we have to talk about some really, just reading through the Bible, talk about some really socially difficult stuff or socially controversial stuff, right? And so basically, you know, it's the same sort of thing. What are you holding in your heart, right? And so if the looking with the lust is the forerunner to the doing of the deed. If you're doing that, you're going to hurt somebody else. It's just going to happen. And it happens all the time between couples and all that kind of stuff where one's looking and wanting and it works and it hurts the other person and they don't feel good. And so, I mean, it's really destructive in a relationship. Even if you think you're hiding it, it comes out. And sometimes it comes out like, I caught him or I caught her. Well, that's the worst way, right? Like then they were, not only were they doing it, they were hiding it from me. So, so that's what it's dealing with. It's dealing with what's inside. Verse 29, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown in hell. I have never heard of a single Christian in all of my studies who ever cut out their right eye. So I don't think Jesus is saying here to actually cut out your right eye. But what it is saying, okay, like when we give up something we want, it hurts. And the fact is, those verses in advance, like you have heard it said, don't commit adultery, everyone who looks at a woman to lust for her, like if you're going to give that up, it's going to hurt. If you give up your anger, it's going to hurt. Like all these things that we hold on to, that we want, if we want to give them up because we believe it's the right thing to do, it's going to hurt. And so that's the thing. Like it's better for you to suffer this hurt than for the calamity to come into your life that you are going to cause because you are continuing to allow yourself to do this bad thing. And so, verse 30, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. So like if getting your life straight means you need to give up something that you feel is a part of you, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to give up something you feel is a part of who you are because it's causing you trouble and it just isn't good for you. It might have become part of your identity, but it never should have, type of a deal. And I've been there. This is why I can say that with certainty. Verse 31. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, this is a long one. Whoever divorces his wife must give her a written notice of divorce. But I tell you, everyone who divorces his wife, except in the case of sexual immorality, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll say this. The only phrase that I find in here that maybe could be interpreted two ways is whoever divorces his wife except in the case of sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, because in the case of sexual immorality she already committed adultery. So if he divorces her because she committed adultery, well, he didn't cause her to commit adultery, she already did it herself. So like that phrase, however, it could also be interpreted, anyone who divorces a woman causes her to commit adultery if she goes and marries somebody else. But there is an if there, so I tend to think the first interpretation is more accurate. Because just because you divorce someone doesn't mean they ever have to be with anyone else again. And so therefore there would be no adultery.
And then whoever marries a divorced
woman commits adultery. Well, there you go, right? So that's when it harkens back to one man, one woman, Adam and Eve. That's what it was supposed to be. Security in marriage, forgiveness, growth. For the record, I'm divorced. So, I am not... I'm not innocent in this respect in any way. However, that doesn't nullify, even for me, that doesn't nullify what this says. And ideally, you marry and you work everything out. That's ideal. And it is something worth striving for. And just because divorce happens, and just because we're not good at marriage, doesn't mean the institution of marriage is bad. So it just means we're bad, and which is the more likely, since marriage was, has been around for thousands of years, functional. The fact that divorce is such a thing now kind of suggests that maybe the problem's us and not marriage. Verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, you must not break your oath, but you must keep your oaths to the Lord. But I tell you, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven, because it is God's throne, or by the earth, because it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, because it is the city of the great King. 36. Neither should you swear by your head, because you cannot make a single hair white or black, but let your word yes be yes, and your no be no. Any more than this is from the evil one. I really like this. And this was something, when I first read it, I wanted that to be part of my life from day one. That if I say I'm going to do a thing, I'm going to do it. And if I say I'm not going to do a thing, I'm not going to do it. And I don't have to make promises and take oaths and all that kind of stuff, because if I say I'm going to do a thing, I'm going to do it. And if I'm not going to do a thing, I'm not going to do it. And so I think this is really good advice, but here's the thing. If you say you're going to do it, you have to do it. And if you say you're not, don't. And so that's the trick, right? And we have the phrase, be a man of your word, or a woman of your word. And that's really what we should be, right? We should be the kind of people where if I say I'm going to do a thing, you can count on the fact that I'm going to do it. It's going to be done. If I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. If I say I got your back, I got your back. And all of that. So I love this one. This is one of my favorites. Let your word yes be yes and your no be no. In fact, I'm going to highlight this. Let's see if I can do it on here. I can highlight it. Maybe. Okay, it's highlighted. Alright, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So this is a hard teaching, right? Because we are used to, I need to look out for myself. That's what, stand up for yourself. We hear this all the time. If you don't look out for you, nobody else is going to. And this seems to say exactly the opposite. And actually, it really kind of does. Because justice, if I try to institute justice, I'm not going to be able to fully do it, right? And so I have to trust that God has my back. And that if you mess with me, God's going to make it right. And that's a lot of what's behind it. And so it's not my job. I don't have to defend myself because God's got it. And that's a lot of what this is saying. And I remember years and years ago, I was really struggling in something. And I started reading this. And I'm like, please. It's so backward from how things work. But I was desperate, so I started doing it. And the thing that I wanted to change began to change. It changed, first of all, it changed me, which meant all my interactions with everyone around me changed. And then the things that I wanted, that I had originally wanted to change, but was trying to do my own way, began to change. And so it was partly from that, right? Partly from what I just read and partly from the next few verses. Verse 43. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? I love it that the IRS is like the absolute devil, other than the devil in the Bible. So I just think that's pretty awesome, because that's pretty much how I feel about the tax collectors. But anywho, even the wicked tax collectors love those who love them. So what is, how are you different if you just act the same way they do? Okay. And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Okay, so technically, I'm a Gentile, right? I'm not a Jew. And so, but that's how I was before. One could say it, that if you only treat people good who treat you good, well, you're no better than anybody else, right? And so if you're going to be different from other people, if you're going to be noticeably different, you have to do things differently. And so you need to love people who don't treat you well. And you need to, greet people that are not your brothers. And the idea really ultimately is like when you show people love, like you make them your brother. They become your brother because you showed them love even when they didn't show it to you. And you showed them love even when they mistreated you. And for he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous.
Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to bad people. So we both go through similar things, but the way we handle what we go through, that's what separates us out. It's not what we have to walk through, it's how we walk through it. That's the thing that makes us different. All right, so this is the end of Matthew chapter 5. It was a long one. So now oh, cool. I had opened ESO so that I could be waiting to get into Cyrodiil, and guess what? I'm in it, which means that I can transition over. Oh, no, you can't. Look at that. Weird. Okay, I can transition over from doing this to game playing. So I'm going to stop it, change my stream information so that it's not showing the wrong thing, which it has been all too often for the first few days. And then I'll be on playing ESO. And hopefully we'll both enjoy the experience, because sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's downright boring, and even for me. So, all right, have a good evening, and I'll be back tomorrow to read Matthew chapter 6.